Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this episode we are welcoming in Jim Vieira, who is like a 3-decade veteran of studying really all things alternative, from spirituality, mystery schools, religions, archaeology, Edgar Cayce, the Tepes. I mean, frankly, we could probably talk to him about everything and anything from, I mean, in pre-production, we're talking about everything from Sitchin to esotericism. So we probably don't have a theme, but I have a feeling that we'll stumble upon a theme at some point. With that, I'm really pleased as punch. He's been on my wish list for a while. So thank you so much, Jim Vieira, for joining the show. Welcome into the garden.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it. And I did some background on your different podcasts and your interests, and seem to be walking the same ground in a lot of different ways. An interest in not just the past, but in metaphysics and spirituality as well. The big questions that demand to be investigated, I believe, because you can ask, what the hell is this place? And what are we doing in time and space in the body? And those are worthwhile things to dive into. I'll just say about myself, I'm a stonemason by trade, studied economics at the University of Massachusetts. My brother and I hosted numerous shows for the History Channel, Search for the Lost Giants, Lost Colony of Roanoke. I've been on a dozen other shows as well. I'm a co-author of several books with Hugh Newman, who's an ancient mysteries researcher, traveled the globe. And, I'll just say about myself, I've learned a lot about human psychology being in this realm, enduring insults and being wrong and self-reflecting and seeing the dynamics of human belief and cult-like thinking. And I feel like hopefully I'm well positioned to objectively analyze very controversial topics. Personally, I live in a tiny cabin. I have no possessions, basically. Stonework pays all my bills. I don't really make any money off of ancient mysteries. It's just kind of something I enjoy doing.
Right.
So hopefully that puts me in a position where I can objectively analyze things. And I'm welcome to talk about a variety of subjects as well.
So we sort of agreed, because you really are a wealth of knowledge and have really sort of done it all, that we could do a jumping off point, sort of A for Atlantis, but specifically with Edgar Cayce. One, because I don't think I've ever really covered Edgar Cayce on the show in the 4.5 years, at least not head on. I mean, he's been mentioned for sure. And And I don't know that I want to spend a ton of time on Edgar Cayce. I mean, because, it's mostly dreams and then verified long distance healings, which, I'm not really sure how they were verified, but let's just take it as so. But at the same time, when I was thinking about that, I mean, we're still talking about Ezekiel and his were dreams, and Daniel's were dreams, and I mean, almost every prophet was based on dreams. So I don't want to diminish it either. I mean, there's an entire religion that's about 150 years old called, the Latter-day Saints, which was based basically on a dream of, one guy who saw an angel who until that moment I don't think was mentioned in any text anywhere else. So, people in dreams, dreams have power. I mean, I saw the show Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I mean, the Dreamcoat referred to dreams. So as I was diminishing it, I realized, stop being a contrarian. So anyway, let's start with Cayce and Atlantis, and we'll just sort of jump around from there.
Yes, Edgar Cayce was born near Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1877. His father was a pastor. He was, in his waking life, essentially an evangelical Christian. Oh, maybe that's wrong. Evangelical has some negative connotations. He was just a devout Christian. He would read the Bible over and over again. And he ended up going into a trance-like state. He was called the sleeping prophet. And I believe originally he healed himself from temporary blindness. And what he described is that it was more like a trance-like state where he would travel to the Akashic records, right? Like the psychic realm where all of the history of the universe was stored there. And he would glean information off of that. So I know that sounds esoteric and weird, but I do have a lot of friends who are clairvoyants and astrologers and study the I Ching, and they have a proclivity to step into the past and the future and be predictive. And there are some hoaxers and charlatans out there. I feel like we're studying a multi-millennial cold case, so I don't mind bringing the skeptics. I mean, the psychics, right?
Sure.
And you can't just put all your weight in what Cayce said, but I find Cayce's really fascinating because he had many predictions about the future that ended up not being right, but he knew many things that he should have no reason to know about the past, like the fact that the Essenes had women in their ranks, that the Nile flowed backwards, and these things came out after his death, after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm intrigued. I'm not dogmatic about Cayce. I study Blavatsky, Steiner, the Rosicrucians of Freemasons. They all have these mythologies or ideas that Atlantis was a historical reality. And that's another subject that I'm interested in. I'm not dogmatic. I can't, nobody has a time machine. You can't prove it, but I think it's something, my gut tells me there's a story there. I'll go there. So anyways, Cayce would go into this trance-like state, and he ended up healing people, giving them alternative cures. He's basically the father of holistic medicine. So you read through a lot of his stuff, and it's really about being kind, about the holographic nature of reality. As the Buddhists would say, to judge another is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to die, because there's only one holographic reality. So it was basically just really kind of benevolent information about how to take care of your body and how to treat others. But within his sessions, he would have people, he started to get into this idea of past lives. In another lifetime, you were in Egypt, and this occurred, and this is why you suffer this current malady. And he was freaked out because, being a conservative Christian, he was not taught. He was taught the idea of reincarnation was antithetical to Christian belief, which it really wasn't. If you read the old the Nag Hammadi scrolls and the real teachings of Jesus, like the Gospel of Thomas or the Apocryphon of John, or the hypostasis of the archons, you read these texts and it's like Jesus sounds like an Eastern mystic, not like a modern day version of what the church has made him. So anyways, Cayce continued, and he would get these readings about these people having past lives in Atlantis. And he claimed, much like Plato, existed in the middle of the Atlantic, that it was a historical reality. He said it was destroyed around 12,000 years ago in a cataclysm.
Mm-hmm.
And many, Graham Hancock and others point to the Younger Dryas impact theory about 12,800 years ago as being this cataclysm as well. So I just find the Cayce material very interesting. I just like to think of myself as a historical detective, and I feel like these esoteric sources, they offer, well, I'll say this. Jonas Salk famously said, intuition shows the thinking mind where to look next.
Right.
And that's what I feel. I feel like the more I've admitted I'm wrong, the more I've self-reflected, the more I moved away from this cult-like thinking or these entrenched positions, my intuition is open up more. It's just like, check this area out and see what this has to say. And all this needs to be verified by archaeology, verified by science. I'm not anti-science by any means, but I think that just like, once again, you get a cold case and the cops always bring in the psychics, and sometimes they're very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and science is not anti-science. I mean, science, they'll always tell you that new science trumps old science. I mean, because it gets tested. And, and there's no proof of Atlantis, and I'm not going to take one position one way or another, but when someone does LiDAR on the Atlantic Ocean, and they actually find, 7 cities or 10 cities, and what was it, 10 kingdoms supposed to be on Atlantis? Whatever it was, they find 10 big cities, sort of, over what could have been an island on, some raised seabed, at the bottom of the ocean, but it's not quite the bottom of the ocean. Then it becomes science that there was at least a continent there, and if you don't want to say that's Atlantis, at least give it a name as a placeholder until somebody can translate the writing that's there. Anyway, the point is that yes, science is evolving. It doesn't. That's why there's theories and doctrines. They're two different things.
Yeah, I think it might be a good time to step in. Like, my kind of only beef with the debunking pseudo-skepticism world is tarnishing everyone with this idea that if you investigate these alternative theories, you're somehow a white supremacist or a racist. Do you mind if I
go ahead?
If I give my thoughts about that? Yeah. One of the things is that the native people, the indigenous people, are the ones who had some pretty bizarre oral traditions. They talked about the gods and supernatural beings showing up or being associated with different stonework sites. But you have that in Malta with the Temple of Gigantea. You have that in Ireland with the Tuatha De Danann, these supernatural beings being attributed with the creation of it in 3200 BC. And in Greece, you have these megalithic ancient sites, and in Italy, they're built by the Cyclops. So you have all these traditions of another race or supernatural beings being associated with megalithic building. And the theory today is that, like, somehow if you talk about Pumapunku or Sacsayhuaman being of a different era, you're diminishing the accomplishments of the indigenous people. And in Egypt's the same way. It's like, I'm going to cast who I perceive as my ideological enemy in the worst possible light. So it's like, you're an idiot, you think aliens built the pyramids. Where the real question is, who are the gods? Because the Egyptian people themselves, their traditions, their written documents, like the Temple Wall at Edfu, coffin text, pyramid text, they talk about the age of the gods. So the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, the Osirian, are they from a different age? We know all the incredible accomplishments of the Egyptians. And it would be, did the Egyptians build them in 12,000 BC with the knowledge of the gods is the question. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, these Nazi supermen showed up and built everything. Of course, there's racists out there, and there's like, they use genetics and all kinds of shit to prove their twisted case. That's not what I'm getting at. Guys like Hancock or Andrew Collins, or I'll throw myself in there. It's like trying to figure out the past, but getting tarnished with this label of white supremacism. If that's the correct word.
It is.
Quickly, if I could read just a couple quotes from Vine Deloria. He's now passed away, but he was a Lakota Sioux elder, considered one of the greatest religious thinkers of the 20th century by Time magazine. And he had a beef with archaeology as well, because of this whole idea of oral traditions being denigrated.
Sure.
So he says, the Indian explanation is always cast aside as superstition, precluding Indians from having an acceptable status of human beings and reducing them in the eyes of educated people to a pre-level human of ignorance. The stereotypical image of American Indians as childlike, superstitious creatures permeates American society because Americans have been taught that scientists are always right, they have no personal biases, and that they do not lie. Now, I agree with Deloria in the sense that when I think of oral traditions, I get this kind of cringy, like, this is a childish superstition that science cannot take seriously. So instead of looking at the indigenous traditions around the planet as possible pieces of evidence and kernels of truth, we're taught that they're superstitious and childlike fantasy because they align oftentimes with religious and biblical ideas that are considered the ideas of the ideological enemy of science and scientists and academics. So you get this, just like in politics, you get the alternative people and you have the mainstream or radicalized wing of archaeology that go back and forth endlessly, and they don't yield an inch to the other. And like integrative medicine, I say meet in the middle, and you use science, the best of science with the best of oral tradition and mythology to solve problems. So that's my take.
Yeah, there's not a single ideology or philosophy in the world that's completely monolithic. And every sect breaks up into smaller sects and has sectarian groups. Every church, every homeowners association, every business group, you name it, it happens. And the point of that is that, if you just take our political parties now, I don't want to get too political, obviously, but I don't believe that everybody that voted for Donald Trump is in the Ku Klux Klan, but I do believe that every member of the Proud Boys of the Oath Keepers probably would if they could. I don't believe that every member of Antifa, if there is a membership or Black Lives Matters, hates every white person out there, but I do believe that there's elements to do. The kids who chant from the river to the sea, most of them don't even know what they're saying, but there probably are some that are extremely anti-Semitic, and not just anti-colonial, which, I mean, it's sort of ironic when you're having, private school, college kids chanting in the Americas about being on colonized land. I mean, the size of Rhode Island is like Israel, and it's like compared to the Americas. Anyway, and I also, even where there are legends and stories of white people, I do not necessarily think that means Caucasian. I don't think that means like people that look like you or me. I think white, maybe like the color of the stars or the moon, like moon people or star people. Anyway, but I also, when there's any theory and then there's a conspiracy theory, if you do open up the wrong door, go down the wrong hatchway, you will find isms, and white supremacy is one of them. And the Nazis famously were trying to weaponize Aryanism, which has ruined a word which is thousands of years old. Armenia is based on Aryan. Iran is Aryan. It is. The Iranic peoples are the Sarmatian Knights. The Scythians were part of the Iranic peoples. They weren't all blonde that looked like Chris Evans and Cripps Helmsford. It wasn't like Thor and Captain America. They weren't all like 6'6" beautiful blonde people. Anyway. My rant doth endeth.
No. That's you make a great point, and the thing to look at is look at your personal biases, look at your cult-like thinking, look at the way you spend your time on social media. Are you addicted to outrage? Are you a victim of the algorithms? The comment section and fucking Twitter and YouTube is the lowest section of hell. And if you choose to go there, you're not changing anybody's opinion. You're doing it because it's like you're a cokehead burnt out looking for a hit. It's just true.
Yeah.
And I've been there, thinking I'm doing the right thing, and all I'm doing is feeding my brain the wrong chemicals, right? So look at objectively these things. Like in the alternative realm, there's no peer review. I can create a cult of personality. It's very stimulating. You do shows and the cameras are following you around, and you're on these millions of people are seeing what you're doing, and then your detractors you go back and forth with, and it's just not a good place to be. Where if you're interested in the truth, that is. Because there's a lot of grifters and bullshit artists in the alternative realm. There's a different kind of cult-like mentality in the pseudo-skeptical debunking realm where they're caught in their own echo chamber as well.
Sure.
And that's why I address this white supremacist thing. It's just like, I'm like a kind of moderate, leans a little left, and it's never done. It's like when I started to get called racist, I'm like, what's that even mean, man? I'm a lot of things, but racist? And then I looked into the whole dynamic, and it's nobody wants to be a racist. And it's like, it's like categorizing archaeologists as involved in a massive conspiracy or cover-up, right? Something that isn't true. And it's like, how do I paint them in the most dismissive and mocking ways? And that happens on both ends. So I don't want to spend too much time there, but there's a lot of that shit. You got Joe Rogan, you got Flint Dibble, you got Hancock, and all the back and forth. And I just wanted to put it out there that, look at the dynamics and look at the cult-like thinking. I will just say that I am a lot like an academic and my co-author, Hugh Newman. But the thing we are different on or disagree on is we put more weight on oral traditions and ancient documents than, say, the scientific world. And that's fine. I have to prove my case, and I work with a lot of academics, and I always ask their opinion, and I try to do my due diligence. So I just, that cult echo chamber shit is about the addiction to being right. It's tons of ego. Because of all the insults I've endured online, nobody to my face has ever insulted me. And all the people I've crossed paths at conferences or out in the waking world. And I say that not just because I'm a tough guy stonemason and can beat people up. It's because people aren't like that in real life.
Yeah.
They hold the door and they're polite and they want the best for people. But online, man, it brings out the fucking worst in the ego.
Yeah, it really does. And all that's true. And I can go on and on about this, and I probably won't, and I shouldn't. I opened an account on Blue Sky like everybody else, but I'm not really particularly active there. And it was just so that I, one, could promote the show, two, to see if I could resist, doing everything that I've done wrong on X and Facebook. And I have one X account. I mean, listen, it's about the least important thing in the world, pro wrestling. So there, it's pro wrestling. You're kayfabe. You're a character. You can play a character, and you should. Well, maybe you should. I don't know. But I saw Flint Dibble's open letter to Graham Hancock. And the thing is like, I'm like, dude, I didn't say it like that, but I'm like, you can't win. You can't fight a cult. You're just adding fuel to it. And any mistake you made, any minor misstep will be used against you. If you just say nothing, they're going to forget about you in 6 weeks. They'll be on to something else. Just do your thing. You're not going to convince people that there's not a big archaeological cabal out there that's trying to hold something back from the establishment. You're just not going to. So just stop feeding the frenzy. They'll look at ufology. They're eating themselves. Let them eat themselves, and just do your thing. And listen, one day you will discover something that's really great that they love, and all of a sudden they're going to love you. And that was basically my message to Flint.
No, that's a great point, and that's what I work. All the shows I've done, I always have skeptics on. Todd Dissetel, Dr. Charles Ewan. And I love shooting the breeze for hours and picking their brains. And it's just like, then it's more like, this is the evidence I need to see, right? Mm-hmm. And being an archaeologist or anthropologist, it's like being a cop, right? You got to deal with a lot of shit. You got to deal with a lot of crazy people to get the respect you deserve because you got a tough job. And online, it weaponizes the worst of people. So I understand it's like, this person misrepresented what I said. They called me a liar. I made a mistake and I feel bad about it, but I'm not going to give any fuel to this other side because there's so many assholes there. Right. There's assholes on both sides. So you get in this, you're agitated, you're fucking wound up, you're overstimulated, and it's tough to hit the brakes. And for me, I withdrew from the whole arena because I used to be in that back and forth realm of trying to make a case, but it never goes anywhere. It's just insults and misdirections, and right and wrong has very little to do with the back and forth. So I think, and just what you said, it's just like, oh, is there a lost hall of records under the Sphinx? There's passageways and corridors and voids in the Great Pyramid, it appears like. They're doing lots of scan pyramid team stuff, and it's like, that'd make a great show. Let's figure out, let's test this hypothesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not let's, just insult each other. So I like to have skeptical voices on any show I do, and I like to work together to solve a problem. And I think everybody feels good about that, right? So that's the right approach. A Hancock reaching out to Zawi Hawass, maybe there's something that works there. It requires the better man to step up and to bury the hatchet, because we need archaeology to solve problems, to do the work they do. But I think we need the kind of maverick mystic at the same time. And I'll say that, like Plato and Pythagoras and the scientists of old, they were a blend. They were like spiritual scientists. So that meeting in the middle is a good place, or at least be open to it and don't insult the metaphysical realm or the alternative realm.
Yeah, I think the overly simplistic way is that with everything, money, power, influence sort of ruins everything. You start at a good place, then you're like, whoa, this is how I'm paying my bills. I need to promulgate this. So, and listen, if all of a sudden, this show went from my normal listenership to, 100 times more listenership, I'd have everybody that's exactly Jim Vieira on forever, and ride that bus too. That's just, that just enlightened self-interest. But, and this is my last bit on this until we move on. I've had Taylor Keene on, who's part of, on Hancock's page and all. He's also a professor. He's an academic. He's also Native American, and he has both his, I hope I don't get this wrong, but he's got both his Sioux name and his Omaha name, because he's his mom's side is one nation, his dad's side is the other nation. So he told all of his names, and he's not particularly funny. He's like, yeah, there are some legends out there of a white this, a white that, but yeah, it might be moon people or star people. But most of our legends are about us. But and if you actually listen to the legends, they're actually not that dissimilar from the legends of Shintoism or the Chinese mythos. And if you actually do enough comparative mythology, they're all pretty darn similar. There's differences, of course, but they're all pretty darn similar.
Yeah, I could give my take on where I think Hancock's story is going. I don't know if there's a personal reluctance for him to go there, but the wisdom keepers or the culture heroes of the indigenous people around the planet are amphibious, androgynous, self-fertilizing genetic engineers that have like 20 different attributes. They're terraforming beings that show up, and it's like, what are you taking acid? But I'll go through, if you would indulge me for a minute.
Sure.
In Mali, Africa, the Dogon people, the Dogon people have this myth of the Nomo.
Right. By the way, there's a god in, I think it's Babylonian Sumerian, named Dagon, who looks pretty much like the description of the Dogon.
Bingo, Oannes, right? So there's this whole controversy. Professor Robert Temple, who's one of the most brilliant academics I've ever encountered, wrote the
been on this show
in the 70s, right? But he focused a lot on the binary star system and the idea that the Dogon should not have had that knowledge. And then Walter Vanderbeek spent time with the Dogon, and he said, like, missionaries might have brought him the information, and he was Mormon himself, so I think he had a little agenda there.
Sure.
But the moral of the story is, that's not in question for me. Olga Matelli, the blind elder in the 30s and 40s, told Marcel Grayal and another anthropologist the oral traditions that dated back thousands of years of the Dogon people. He studied with his grandfather and father for 20 years. So Olga Matelli tells him that the Nomo were androgynous, brother and sister, twin, amphibious beings who created humans. It's like, whoa, that's a mouthful. That's a bunch of pretty specific characteristics. And their art shows the Nomo. They show them with fish tails. How they were described is basically they waddled around they were these composite-like beings, and they said specifically they're from Sirius. So these are extraterrestrial beings that the Dogon are telling us were. But once again, they're brother and sister, husband and wife, self-fertilizing androgens. They split like an amoeba to procreate, and that sounds bizarre, but that's how they were portrayed. So you go over to Sumeria, and then you have the same thing. Oannes is this fish god who teaches the Babylonians and the Sumerians the arts of civilization. Then he goes in the river at night or the ocean at night because he's amphibious. And Berosus specifically tells us about that in his Babylonica in 280 BC. Every one of the Sumerian kings in the kings list that go back hundreds of thousands of years had an avatar or a helper or a vizier, I should say, of a composite fish being like Oannes. Carl Sagan specifically says that is very reasonable hypothesis to investigate these fish beings because there's a succession of strange creatures that the Sumerians specifically tell us taught them the arts of civilization. Now, let me hit a couple quick places. You go over to China. Who is the creator of the Chinese civilization? Fuxi and Nuwa, fish-tailed, human-esque hybrid beings who are brother and sister, husband and wife, self-fertilizing androgens and twins who terraform after a cataclysm. And then you go to Peru, and it's Vieracocha and Mamacocha. They are brother and sister, husband and wife, self-fertilizing androgens. Even Marcia Silverblatt, Duke University professor, says there is no doubt that Vieracocha is androgynous. He emerges out of Lake Titicaca. His representation on the Bennett monolith, he is covered in fish scales, and there were shrines all around Lake Titicaca of Mamacocha with the fish tail. And then you get into Dercato, you get into Atargatis, you get into the Greek, like Triton has breasts and a beard, the iconography of androgyny and this fish-tailed idea. And then finally you go to Egypt, Isis and Osiris, the Ogdoad and the Ennead, the Eights, they're all self-fertilizing brother and sister androgens, just like the Nomo in Africa. So you have the same mythology of these bizarre, you would call them extraterrestrial beings who show up. They teach the arts of civilization. They have specific traits that are utterly bizarre. Even Sedna in Greenland, the Inuit, have a self-fertilizing androgen fish goddess as a creatrix as well. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I'll do these presentations where, a couple hours where I'll show account after account after account of all the written records that say the same thing. Now, to me, that's like, these traditions look more based in some kind of historical reality than some ephemeral sky god or whatever.
Well, it's like a water god almost. But yeah, I mean, and I think none of those creatures, beings, sound like white guys. I mean, they all sound more like, blue, green, whatever the color of like dolphins or whales are is probably more likely. But they're scaled, so they're not mammalian, I guess. So they're kosher.
Well, if you Google like Matsya and Mastya in India, you will see all these images and the tapestries of this bizarre half human, half fish-tailed being teaching the people in India. It's totally bizarre. But he saves Manu from the flood, and he saved the sacred text as well. And that's these fish beings are associated with like this cataclysm and showing up after the cataclysm with knowledge for humans. So it's very specific.
I just came up with two things. One is a question, but the first one is like, this will never happen, but I wish I could get like a panel of Talmudic scholars on here and have them debate whether or not eating one of these things is okay because they're kosher, because they're full of scales, and or the human part is least mammalian, or it's cannibalism, that it's anathema to religion. So I would love to have that, and it's not limited to Talmudical scholars. I just don't know what the equivalent is in the other religions or philosophies. The other thing is this true? I have heard that the oldest images of the Trinity, and this Trinity being Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, whatever their original names were all the same. They were half man, half fish, like mermen.
Absolutely. The oldest representations of Poseidon and Zeus have a fish's tail. Triton has a fish's tail. It's remarkable. And they were called by the Babylonians, Oannes, he was called Mascaris and Amadotus. That's what Robert Temple points out. Horrible to look upon, loathsome. And he said a more sane representation of these incredible culture heroes were to portray them in some great fashion. Instead, the wisdom bringers who teach humans the arts of civilization all around the world are considered these absolutely bizarre and loathsome creatures that like waddle around, just like the Nomos said. And the physical representations are everywhere. Hapi in Egypt, he is androgynous, has breasts and a beard, just like Triton has breasts and a beard. The androgynous iconography is everywhere, and the androgynous nature is displayed in the writings, the Ugaritic texts. I'll quickly say, like Sitchin, we could talk about him and his work for a second if you want.
Sure.
But I don't go to Sitchin. I don't go to the more science fiction writers. I go to the earliest Assyriologists like H.V. Hilprecht, right? From the University of Pennsylvania. He led the Babylonian expedition. He wrote about it with his colleague Hugo Radeau. And what do they say in his book? All Sumerian gods are androgynous, brother and sister, husband and wife, self-fertilizing androgens who beget out of themselves. And then on the temple walls of Edfu, you have the building texts where there's a lot of controversy of like, does it talk about the Atlantean flood? What it does specifically state in three different, and I read through all the translations, in three different passages, it says the Ogdoad, who are brother and sister, husband and wife, self-fertilizing androgens. They say that they beget from each other. They are self-fertilizing right there, and it can't be disputed. So you can say, I don't believe any of that, but it's like, isn't that interesting that all these ancient texts, oftentimes in cultures that had little or no contact, like in Peru or Greenland or whatever, are saying the same thing about their culture heroes. They are amphibious, self-fertilizing androgens. And I will say, I think, because Hancock in his first series, he talked about Oannes, he talked about Vieracocha, he talked about the fish people. But does he really want to go to the realm of, okay, instead of like human-esque survivors from a flood, you know who showed up around the planet? These fish freaks who were genetic engineered. Like, then he's way out there, and then he's getting mocked even harder. So I don't give a shit personally, because it's not, I have so much integrity, but I don't have a brand out there that I gotta like deal with. I don't get to deal with monetizing myself or marketing myself. I just don't give a shit. Stonework pays the bills, but it's 3 a.m. and I'm reading Ugaritic text or something. So I'm obsessed. I get that.
Right. It's your passion.
The story is so bizarre. I think Hancock might avoid going even deeper into it. That's my take.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's sort of married to a particular, advanced human civilization, which is lovely. I mean, I guess, but I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. Again, it's just the way that he talks about it. If he drew the lines perforated, as opposed to straight lines, in solid pen, that would be one thing. I'm all for it. I am not opposed to someone saying, "Hey, look, there's snake imagery at Göbekli Tepe, and look, it looks like there's a pomegranate there or an apple there, and that probably influenced the story of the Old Testament." I absolutely just based on what you were just saying, I think it verifies that there's some root truth or a root, myth that somebody's came up with at some point, I'm more inclined to think it was probably, in Central Africa 250,000 years ago than it was, aliens or an advanced technology that we have no sign of that also conveniently had free energy from us all. And, big energy is keeping that from us. And, and because that all fits into the into the cabal ruling the world thing. And there are cabals that influence the world, but they're not necessarily, it's just about money. Anyway, that's a whole that's a whole different thing altogether. Because every cabal conspiracy leads to anti-Semitism. That much I know.
That's one thing that the conservatives have to really understand is that you can't, like, the left's got its lots of issues, and it got steamrolled in the last election because of pushing a radical agenda. I'm all for, like, gay and lesbian, transsexual rights, but you gotta understand, people are, they're interested in, like, their bottom line. They're trying to struggle, and they don't want to be told they're pieces of shit because they were born white. And there's a cult like happening on the left. On the right, definitely there is hardcore racism and anti-Semitism. The further right you go, and if you want to capture, I don't know, a better society, I think being moderate. See, I'll tell this story quickly. A couple years back, Matthew McConaughey and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, they both started to tease a little that they might want to get into politics. And at the time, I was entrenched in my own cult-like thinking. And I said, I like both of them, but they just don't understand how bad the other side is. Because my feed was weaponized by outrage, like the worst quotes, the worst characteristics of who I perceived as my ideological enemy, right? But honestly, now I feel like more in the middle where, my brother and I are former coaches and decathletes, so we deal with a lot of parents. And I got friends who are conservative, I got friends who are liberal and moderate and libertarian. And, I just, like, I want the best for them. I want the best for the kids when I'm coaching, but ultimately I want to be moderate. And whenever I'm in a weaponized position, it just, it doesn't work out well. And I think it's just, all things in moderation, including moderation, is a good way to approach this.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that most people are, whether or not you believe that trans is a thing, which is interesting. We were just talking about androgynous, creatures, basically. But whether or not you think trans is a thing, it's like, I think most people don't really care. I don't mean like they're not concerned about it. It's none of my business if somebody thinks that. I think they do care when their 16-year-old girl plays field hockey and they're playing against a 16-year-old, prepubescent boy who's now a girl, and they barrel over her, or, and other things. Or, somebody, they decide they're a different sex, and let's face it, it's when the males become the females that there's the danger that they're in a bathroom, and not the platitudes where people say every time you go into someone's houses you're using a unisex bathroom or there's unisex. I mean, but when you're in a school and there's only boys and girls room, and a 17-year-old prepubescent male who's now a girl goes in there and assaults, a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl, they don't have a chance. I mean, so that's what people, don't want shoved down their throats as far as freedom and housing and employment and voting rights and basic civil rights and human rights. But when you try to make, 99% of the population pivot for 1% or less, that's trouble. You have to find a compromise to help everyone. You can't ask the 99% to change, go 90 degrees overnight, which is, and both sides do this. It's just, this is the issue of the day. But I think you're right. I think most people exist in the center, and I don't want to get into political, but I really think that if money was taken out of federal politics, you could actually get a more representative House of Representatives. And we could agree, like, if there's 10 points to fix any problem or seriously address it, I think most people could agree on somewhere between 6 and 8 of them, and we could get that 65%, okay legislation, and perfect would not be the the obstacle of good.
I completely agree, and that's why Carl Sagan he's my spirit animal in the scientific world, and that's what I'm getting at. That's what we're getting at, is that we have differing opinions about the past. One that is more based in myth and legend, in written documents, cuneiform text, and another is the kind of modern, orthodox version of the past. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Or it could be like there's a more bizarre story of I'm not anti-evolution, but, we're humans. The ancient traditions say that we were either altered or braided out of, by genetic engineers. And it's like, well, that's, it's not just some ephemeral myth. It's in the Popol Vuh in northern Guatemala. We are created as avatars, and we are first created as androgynous, and then we are downgraded because we are like the gods, because we're supposed to be workers. The same thing happens in the Sumerian texts and in the Bible. The first Adam is androgynous, and then he's downgraded. And you see, like, the humans have a long lifespan at first. And it sounds, that's weird and religious and mythological, but that tradition holds across the world. It's ubiquitous. And once again, you could say I don't believe that, but the traditions are pretty specific about these things. Even Aristophanes displays the knowledge of the myth of the ancient androgen in Plato's work. Zeus, who was one of these psychotic androgynous creator gods, there's benevolent ones and malevolent ones. He downgrades, he splits humans in half into the male-female configuration. And then you say, that sounds weird, but Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner, Madame Blavatsky, the Rosicrucians and Freemasons all say that humans were created first androgynous and then downgraded.
So the Greeks, the golden age of man was just man. And then Pandora came around, it's basically the same story as Eve.
And then you go to the oldest temple sites on Earth, like Ayin Ghazal, and you have the two-headed busts. And Erit Ziffer, an archaeologist who I've been in contact with, she wrote a paper in 2007 in the Israeli Exploration Journal. She's an archaeologist from Haifa University, I believe. And she wrote a paper, Ayin Ghazal, the two-headed busts, Adam and the first androgyny. She claims that ancient people believed that not only were the gods androgynous, but the first humans were, and the two-headed busts display the iconography that shows that they believed in this androgyny. So we, at the oldest cities on Earth, the oldest temple sites, we find the androgynous iconography displayed. And then at Karahan Tepe, the super ancient site in Turkey that was just unearthed a couple of years ago, they found a double-headed idol displaying this androgynous iconography. And I emailed her recently. I said, you should do a victory lap because you basically predicted that this even older culture believed in the androgynous nature of the first humans. Her paper is fascinating. Israeli Exploration Journal 2007. If anybody's interested, I would read that. And for me, that's where I want to be. I want to work with these brilliant academics. I understand the jargon of the academic world. It's tough to, but I can bridge it with my twisted metaphysical understandings and meet in the middle, because I believe there's a real story here. And even if there isn't, you approach it in a way where you respectfully go back and forth and figure out the truth. You don't insult each other. You don't denigrate each other's thought systems. And that's why I like working with professionals who basically keep to themselves, not who are on social media all day running their mouth. And I get it, because there's assholes on both sides. But as a professional, I think you got to keep your shit together more. As like a grifter, alternative freak on the other side who's just getting clicks, whatever. You're not going to talk them out of anything. They're just like, they get their grifter hat on, you know?
Exactly. It's the difference between the sports radio host and the actual athlete. You do not see the linebacker who missed the tackle fighting with the fans online, but you'll have the home team sports guy, fighting, and probably they have a host that's fighting with them, a co-host that's fighting with them about it. I mean, and they'll engage on social media sometimes they won't. Like the Skip Baylesses, of the world or whatnot. That's the difference. It's, part of the shtick, but the actual professionals stay out of it. I mean, you don't see, Barack Obama yelling to people on social media, engage in conversation. Now, he might post something that's preachy or a speech, but he's not going to get into it with, like, say, me, and neither would George W. Bush, and neither would Jeb Bush, and neither would Mitt Romney. So I don't want to make it all about Democrats for sure. I mean, just the professionals wouldn't. They're just not going to go there. It's a waste of their time. The interesting thing is, if you actually look at all these things, they could actually, I mean, not to get Hancockian, but they they could actually be metaphors for the actual science of evolution. I mean, mammals came from the sea. Our life forms emerged from the sea. And a lot of creatures are androgynous or switch sexes, like if they can't have a partner. And a lot of those are amphibious. I mean, we've seen frogs and crocodilians and other lizards. I mean, I'm sure there's others. I'm sure there's examples in the avian community. I don't know about mammals, but there are weird things like echidnas and platypus. At some point, there are probably more of them. And, it's almost like they had some understanding, either specific or intuitive knowledge of, coming from the sea, emerging from the sea, and there being at least the ability to be androgynous. The old chicken and the egg thing. Well, maybe the first chicken, became androgynous and created their own egg. I mean, they answered it by saying that humans were androgynous. I don't know, but it's to that kind of, again, one of the things I agree with. Well, no, one of the things I agree with the Hancock critics about and the von Daniken critics about is that you're not giving ancient people credit. I mean, they weren't dummies. We've advanced in 300,000 years more than any other species has. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, reasonable minds can differ. But they weren't dummies. They just didn't invent the tools yet and the technologies and whatever. But, to think that they didn't have imaginations. I mean, imagine somebody coming, finding, our streaming services or our literature in 2,000 years and thinking that we thought the Starship Enterprise and the Klingons was history. I mean, like they couldn't come up with fiction too. Everything they were so enraptured with the gods and trying to explain the world around them. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. First of all, you have the aquatic ape theory. I am not against the idea that this is a collective unconscious way to discuss how we evolved. I will say the missing idea of the past is like, who are the gods? Because the gods are the ones who transmitted knowledge to us. Mm-hmm. And that's when you get into the von Daniken and the Hancockian mythologies about the past. And even Giorgio talks about it too, who I'm friends with. Really nice guy. And he's like, I'm not saying aliens built the pyramids. You're trying to portray me in the worst possible way. I'm like, who are the gods of the ancient Egyptians? Mm-hmm. Because they are the ones who teach writing. They're the ones who teach engineering. So we're not saying, the whole argument is like, did these ancient people get this incredible leap of knowledge by these bizarre beings that showed up? So that's my case. It's like, there seems to be a story there. If you indulge me for a second, I will read Carl Sagan's quote about, Sagan says, stories like the Oannes legend deserve more critical studies than have been heretofore performed. Hypotheses such as these are entirely reasonable and worthy of careful analysis. Sumerian civilization is depicted by the descendants of the Sumerians themselves to be of non-human origin. A succession of strange creatures appears over the course of several generations. Their only apparent purpose is to instruct mankind. Each knows of the mission and accomplishment of their predecessors. The same thing that is told by the Dogon people, the Egyptian people tell us the same thing. It's these gods show up in Ireland, they show up everywhere, and they teach the arts of civilization. You could say whatever you want, but then when you get, into this idea of it's like an ephemeral theory, to them it wasn't. These are flesh and blood beings who usually taught the arts of civilization during the day. They were composite amphibians. They were androgynous, and they slept in the river at night or the ocean at night. That's what Fuxi did. That's what Matsei in India did. That's what Vieracocha did, and that's what Oannes did. On and on and on. They were like, and they lived in the watery realm, the Absu of the Apkalu and of Enki and Enlil. They specifically lived in these underwater realms. So you could, say this is ephemeral, or you could say whatever. I don't believe it. Show me a fish god body, and I get it. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty weird how specific these ideas are.
No, it's interesting. All right. Well, I mean, we could go on and on about this stuff forever, but I have you here, and you're a font of knowledge, and I do. And you touched on Karahan and Tepes, so let's talk a little bit about the Tepes, because I mean, they were only discovered about 25 years ago, the first one, Göbekli, Karahan much later. I'm sure that there's going to be other ones found, and there's probably others that won't be found because they're under cities and stuff like that. But like, what are the, first of all, I guess, what are they? What imagery are we seeing? What's similar? What's different? What's the whole story with they were buried purposely? Then other people say no, they weren't buried purposely. They were landslides. What's up with the Tepes?
What's up with the Tepes? The original Tepe that was found was Karahan Tepe in Turkey. And for people who don't know, it's an ancient ringed megalithic site. It's kind of like, it's not as complex as Stonehenge, but there are some up to 18-foot tall stone pillars and these concentric rings that were found by Professor Klaus Schmidt. When was the first? 96 maybe was the first beginning of the unearthings?
Probably.
Anyways, what's stunning is that the sites date back 11,600 years old, 12,000 years old. Super ancient and sophisticated culture that shouldn't have existed through the lens of what the thoughts about the evolution of history and society and temple building. So we have a hunter-gatherer population who lived in a very rudimentary way for thousands and thousands of years in the Sanliurfa region of southeast Turkey. And then seemingly overnight, that's the Graham Hancock argument, there was this explosion of megalithic building. And I hear the detractors, it's like, oh, they did some stonework, oh, this and that. But I'm a stonemason myself with an expertise in engineering. And it's not like this was impossible what they did. Like they created things that could only be done with tools they didn't have. It was more like the organizational aspect of it, the engineering aspect was extreme.
It wasn't a whim. It was a project, a large-scale project.
And yeah, Hugh Newman, he just got back, my co-author. Yeah, he calls it a ancient super civilization, essentially, because there's not just Göbekli itself. Tepe itself has been about 5% excavated. So there's dozens and dozens of these concentric rings and pillars and animal carvings. These relief carvings that are very hard to do. You got to go all the way down to get this beast coming out of this pillar. It's sophisticated work, and you got to survive. 12,000 years ago, it's crazy the organization. So something mind-bending and complex occurred. Was it a restart of civilization after a cataclysm? We don't know, of course, but something occurred that is quite extraordinary. So we have now at least 12 Göbekli Tepes, if you will, like these super sites. And they're finding more all the time.
Right.
So it's like, wow. We used to think the temples in Malta and the Sumerian civilization of 4,000 BC was as old and sophisticated as it got. And now we get this huge curveball. And the thing is that if you want to disagree with the Hancock hypothesis, it's like, okay, let's start. When Hancock started out, he claimed that there was a civilization that was older, that we're going back 10, 12,000 BC. Excuse me. He claimed that there was a cataclysm that occurred at the same time. And what has been revealed is that the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis has been pretty much verified by an international team of professional scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go back to Robert Schoch when he said, he's a geologist from BU that said that the Sphinx weathering indicates it's probably more like 10,000 years old. And he had a panel with Dr. Mark Lerner in 1991 at the University of Chicago, I believe, where they pushed back on the idea. And they said to Schoch that there was no 10,000-year-old structure on Earth contemporaneous with this idea that we had a sophisticated civilization. It does not exist. Your idea is not based in reality, blah, blah, blah. So I would say, I'd give it to Hancock that Göbekli Tepe has been found to be of a date that you claim that this lost civilization promulgated knowledge to restart civilization, and there's this cataclysmic event. So you turn back to but then this is what I need to see to solve your case to make it a reality.
Right.
So I would give him some props. And then you turn back to Turkey, and you have this anomaly that shows up, it's really it's quite a thing, and that shows you like, oh, are archaeologists covering up all that evidence? No, it's like there is some weaponization and some radicalization on both ends, but it's just like, okay, what do we do now? What does it say about the domestication of plants and animals? What does it say about what they thought of the gods? Because there's androgynous iconography there, and there's extra digits. Polydactylism occurs at Karahan Tepe, Sayburch, Ayin Ghazal, Jericho, Australian rock art.
Yeah, what do you think that means? Do you think that is there a significance to having 6 fingers or toes, or is it just an example of something that's humanoid but extra human and giant? I mean, I hear polydactyl a lot. I hear that there's evidence of it, but other than sort of pictographs, and I don't see it. But some people say it's the mark of Cain, it's the Nephilim, it's the evil. Others, it's just you're a giant, you're bigger, you have an extra finger. I mean, that's only natural.
I'm writing a book on polydactylism right now, and it's like 85% of it is gleaning from academic journals and academic papers and archaeological digs. And I'll tell the story going back to Sumeria. The Suma Izbu is a compendium of roughly 2,800 tetralogical omens. And omens 3 and 4 talk about polydactyly. The exorcists, temple priests, and sorcerers of Sumeria and Babylonia were obsessed with polydactylism. They wrote, it's a rare genetic condition in humans, right? So if your child is born with 6 fingers on one hand, it means it's auspicious, it's malevolent on the other. So around the world, extra digits are associated with the divine, the supernatural, the malevolent, and giants. Mm-hmm. It's quite a catch-all. And that goes into Mesoamerica. At Palenque, you have polydactylism in the relief carvings everywhere. In the American Southwest, you have it. But you also have legends of giants and giant hands and feet with extra digits found around the world, verified by academics. You go to Botswana, Matsing emerges from the place of the pools of emergence along with humans, and the giant footprints that are carved there have 6 toes. You go to Australia, and Professor Paul Sasson just wrote a paper like 2 years ago. It was oldest narrative in the world found. You probably saw it in your archaeological searches. And in it, he talks about these giant feet that were carved with 6 toes. And he's like, whenever I find these feet that are oversized, they always have extra digits. He even wrote an academic paper about it that's yet unpublished. The giant of Gath in the Bible has 6 fingers and 6 toes, 24 digits in all, Samuel 21:20. And the thing is that there is no genetic condition within modern humans that mixes pituitary gigantism with polydactylism. So why is it associated with giants around the world? Judiculla Rock in North Carolina, the 7-fingered petroglyph that you find there is from Judiculla, the 7-fingered, 7-toed giant of Cherokee tradition, shared to the Smithsonian ethnologist James Mooney. And I could go on and on. The entire world, including isolated Pacific islands, have giant hands and feet with extra digits. So to me, it's like, there's got to be a story there. I don't know what it is, but you know what I mean? And I'll lastly say that Ayin Ghazal, Jericho, and now Karahan Tepe and Sayburch, the oldest cities on Earth, display the iconography of polydactylism. I just did an Ancient Aliens with you and Andrew Collins, and we talked about the 16-fingered statue found at Karahan Tepe. Now, Professor Carul, who excavated Karahan Tepe, he said the humanoids always have extra digits, never 5. This is from like a sober academic, and you hear this everywhere. So to wrap it up, I believe there's a story there. I'm writing a book about it. I think it's fascinating. We'll see what happens. But we were going to do an episode for a show called Megalyth Men that my brother Hugh and I were going to be the hosts for. Like, my production team sent it to, I think it was Discovery at the time, right? Because we're always pitching shows. I got to pitch it in Netflix right now. And we were going to excavate Karahan Tepe. because at the time, Hugh knew the landowner. It was like 25 miles from Göbekli Tepe. It had not been excavated, but there were T-shaped pillars sticking out of the surface. So we were going to hire a contract archaeology team out of Turkey to excavate it. I wrote up the plot for the episode, and what I wanted to find and predicted would be found was double-headed iconography of an androgynous nature that is also found at the oldest cities on Earth, and extra digits. And both things were found by Carrul and the archaeological team because they excavated the place before we got to it. That doesn't make me Nostradamus, but what I'm showing is the belief systems of these people keep going back and back further in time.
Right, there's a privity.
Yes. So where did they originate? Who are the gods? What does extra digits have to do with it? Were we really androgynous? These genetic engineers who created humans in the traditions, they make all these iterations. There's these fuck-ups. They make like hermaphroditic dolls. The Navajo tell us that couldn't speak or walk. There's a series of genetic experiments, and then they landed on the avatar, the worker bee that modern humans are.
Yeah, but well, every religion and mythos, well, not every, but a lot of them have it. I mean, the Anunnaki, they messed up a whole lot. In the Old Testament, some people blame the Nephilim for the flood. They're sort of abominations. You have the mother of monsters, and the father of monsters, Typhon in Greek mythology. So, it's all sort of there. What is the origin of it? I don't know, but I think you're right. It's interesting to find out what the origin is, whatever it is. Even if we do find out that my very simple and probably overly simplistic that, at some point in, let's just say Botswana, I'm not great with my African geography, but let's just say in Botswana, that was the first place that there was a city that 10,000 people lived in, and a group of the elders, came up with, an origin story, and it sort of morphed from there, and it changed a little bit or a lot depending on how time went on and how environmental needs would, obviously water gods are more important where you don't have a lot of rain, stuff, things like that. But it's the human story. We want to answer it, and some things are unanswerable. But I think what you're saying is be curious, have fun, have an open mind. Don't be dogmatic, because nobody knows the answer for sure. It's easy to say it was aliens. It's easy to say there was an advanced human civilization. It's easy to say it was God. It's easy, and it's impossible to disprove any of those things. So anyone who's preaching to you that something is, don't believe any absolutes, but listen to it all, take it in, form your own opinions, maybe, but, keep an open mind and keep following research such as yours and the established archaeology. And, because, most people want to do good. Most people want to have their mark on the world, not being that they kill 2,700 people. Most people would like, to be known for something positive.
Speak for yourself. No.
Yeah.
And I would say, encourage people to look at the orientation of the people who deliver the evidence or the information that you're listening to. What's the agenda? What's their affiliations? Are they moderate? Are they reasonable? Are they open-minded? Or are they kind of caustic? They feed you the red meat that your ego wants to pretend you're better than somebody else? Because I find that a lot, ancient mysteries are a gateway drug into the spiritual and metaphysical world. Mm-hmm. I find a lot of people want to know, what is my true nature? What am I doing in a body? Where did the universe come from? And there are answers to those questions in the metaphysical world. The spiritual masters throughout history, they all say the same strange, radical, and specific thing about what we really are, where the hell this place came from, what we're doing stuck in a body. And I would just encourage, the scientific world can operate like an atheistic cult sometimes, like a really rigid. It's not just like dismissing spiritual ideas. It's there's like sport in mocking them. Mm-hmm. That somehow you're unhinged. And I'll just say myself, I had a traumatic brain injury playing football, and I ended up with an intractable seizure disorder. and I ended up doing a ton of ayahuasca and San Pedro ceremonies to help heal it. And in fact, I did, and I haven't had a seizure or taken medication for, I believe, close to 15 years.
Wow.
All medically verified by my neurologist. But that opened me up more to the metaphysical realms, because you self-reflect, you look at your own toxic thinking and ways of being. You're kind of forced to engage in introspection. And I just find there's a lot of people, they're not like racist or whatever. They're just interested in the metaphysical. And they might get, sucked in by somebody's grift or whatever. They may be gullible, but they have a genuine interest in the metaphysical world, the spiritual world. And I think that's a big part of this that gets overlooked by academics, that the academic world, just like your doctor can't answer a more metaphysical question for you, which is fine. But once again, the scientists of old were more, they went through initiation schools, they took psychedelics. They really, that's why Plato's work is flawless, because he reoriented himself to be like humble and open-minded and connected to the divine. And I just think that's a better way to orient your life, quite frankly.
Yeah, and he usually gave the credit to Socrates as well, so he was humble in his own way. Actually, that was probably the hugest symbol of humility in that age, if you attribute your writings to somebody else, because that's the opposite of fame. And Greek and Viking culture, sort of like fame was the end result. It wasn't really right or wrong. It was sort of who he conquered. Anyway, we could go on forever, but when you finish your book or when your show is about to launch, hopefully you will get on Netflix. They seem to be having a fair amount of success with sort of shows in this arena, whether it's the George Knapp show on UFOs or whether it's 2 seasons of Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse. Season 1 was better than season 2. But I think they're open to more of these things, and they know there's an audience for it. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with watching these things and I watch the Avengers. That doesn't mean I think that I'm going to be able to build a suit of armor and fly around and shoot things. And I think most people take it in like that and go, cool, that's really interesting. Like to hear more. I don't think that makes them go, the world is hiding secret free energy. I know there's some people who do believe that, and they think Tesla was silenced and Elon Musk is going to save us all. Personally, I think Elon Musk is building phones connected to his Starlink and whatever it is. I think actually his goal is to have the entire inner belt to the sun as his emperorship. I think it's quite the opposite. I think he's trying to build an empire, but whatever. It's not like I changed the way I live because of it. I can't. So everyone just chill out.
Everybody definitely chill out. I think it's admitting when you're wrong, looking at your biases. That's the healthiest thing you could do, man. I learned so much, and I've become so even much more even keeled by evaluating where I was wrong, what I had in error. It changes your disposition. Get rid of the addiction to being right. I've reoriented myself. I don't want anything from anyone. I have no agenda, and it doesn't make me like Mother Teresa. I'm just saying, I'm like a spiritual seeker, so I've stripped possessions and externalities out of my life. Like I said, I live in a 10-foot by 12-foot cabin, drive an old beat-up pickup truck. I am not beholden on anybody or anything other than doing stonework to pay my bills. So I feel like at the end of the day, I'm just curious and open-minded, rather than somebody defending my turf or trying to insult somebody who insulted me. That's just a shit way of going through life. I spend my time trying to be in service to people, trying to be kind, trying to be helpful, taking any extra resources and assisting people in need. That's the impact that in all my metaphysical studies and all my spiritual journeys, I could see that the back and forth, it's not even negative. It's nothing. It's just like energy moving around needlessly. And all the kind and open-minded, open-hearted things you do actually have a huge impact, because the mystics would say that's your real state. You are not a freak that's trapped in a body. You're kind of a divine field. Rumi would say there is a field beyond concepts of good and bad. I will meet you there. That is what the mystics say is our real state. and the realm of time and space is a temporary projection. It is not. It's a prodigal sons and daughters acid trip or thought experiment. Don't take it so fucking seriously. Chill out. Forgive. Let people be. Act kindly, and you will find your entire life will fucking shift, and all the agitations and worries will drift away. And I don't say that as like a cultish like way of being. Every master, every wisdom teacher throughout human history said it, and my own personal experience informs me of it, not my intellectual understanding. Like I've abandoned my ego and traveled to the realm of the one or the realm of light, and it sounds like New Age bullshit, but it isn't. So that'd be my closing remarks. That's a good way to go through life. Let people be. Don't seek out conflict because you're operating from a low-level drug addict's fucking addicted to outrage orientation. And I've been there, so I'm not trying to be hypocritical.
Well, New Age is old age.
Yeah.
When New Age and Old Age are the same, maybe it should be age. Maybe that is just the idyllic state. That's as close as we get to our idyllic state of nature. I mean, you sound content. That really is as good as it gets. I mean, because the people who live in vast wealth, it's never as good as it gets. I mean, I don't want to paint every wealthy person with Epstein, P. Diddy, Vince McMahon, proclivities. But there's a shitload of you always need more. Some type of rush, whether it's money, power, influence, whatever. Dwayne Johnson, as a pro wrestler and as an actor, fantastic. Everything he touched turned to gold. Then he started trying to do these other businesses and flop. Then he tried to do creative control and basically destroyed the entire DC universe. He was just the last straw on an already damaged product. But if you're having I know that driven people are driven to always have new challenges, but at some point you just sort of have to be like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I do. And for God's sake, if you're worth $600 million, isn't that good enough? I mean,
it isn't, because I'll read a quote.
Well, Bruce Springsteen has told us in what is it, Badlands? The poor man wants to be rich man wants to be king. King ain't satisfied till he rules everything.
That's the thing. You're not being objectively honest about this experience. We are temporarily in a body. It doesn't last. They'll be throwing me in the pit. Hopefully, I squeeze out another 30 years, maybe, but. Then what happens? Then what are you? What are we in reality? And every teacher of wisdom throughout Jesus, Buddha, Ramana Maharshi, the Advaita Vedanta, Lao Tzu, they all say the same thing. And I'll just throw a Maharshi quote out here. Man's search for happiness is an unconscious search for his true self. So I've read the Ashtavakra Gita over and over again, and it's supposed to hurl you into the realm of the one, into your real state. And it has. And I don't want to come back. I reconfigure back into my stupid, fearful, misrepresented self, but I still have that connection to the divine, I feel. And the point is that we search externally for what we already are. So all the spiritual masters say, you undo all that is false in front of your divinity. You put your ego to sleep, and then you re-experience what you eternally are, what you already are. But instead, it's like, as a male, it's like I misperceive beauty as love. I am driven externally to find what I've lost because I'm believing and I'm over-identifying with my separate self. So it's this constant search in the world for attention, for possessions, for neurological, neurochemical hits in lieu of a retreat back into your real, blissful, silent self that is eternal. And that, I don't think that's just like a New Age philosophy. That's my personal experience. And when people want to know about spirituality, that's what every master says, and on and on and on. So that's a long-winded way of saying, turn within, forgive, let go of your personal identity if you seek happiness and peace. You're not going to get it by getting a new fucking car. It'll give you a temporary hit like a cokehead, but there'll be no lasting peace there. And,
right.
and that's my experience in life.
Exactly. There's no keeping up with the Joneses, and the Joneses aren't happy either.
No, it doesn't work.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much. I truly hope that you come back. We covered a whole lot of things. I'm not really sure what I'm going to call it, so I think I'm thinking of Vieracocha. I don't know. So something along those lines. But is there a song that you associate with your state of mind or with what we've talked about as the outro?
Well, Hugh Newman, when I do tours with them, they started calling me Vieracocha when we were in Peru, and I was Jim Hotep in Egypt. What I would say is, if anybody's interested, like in the stuff I do, I'm on Facebook. I like to say I get the tech skills. I'm an Amish preacher, so there's a couple dead Jim Vieira pages, but there's a Jim Vieira with me and my brother.
Yeah.
He has 2 hammers in his hands. Yeah, you know the one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting down. We're filming The Lost Colony of Roanoke, and I post, I'll post mostly like cat pics and stuff, but I'll post appearances, new books and things. But on Hugh Newman's website, megalythomania.com or .uk, there's a Jim Vieira video section if you're interested in all the weird and wonderful things I cover. And just throw me a line on Facebook if you want, or just follow along when I got some things going on. And when my book is published, I'll send you a copy, see what you think.
Excellent.
And, thanks for having me on, and let's stay in touch, brother.
Absolutely. All right. What do you think about Drift Away, Dobie Gray? Does that sound okay? I always had groovy. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an outro. I try to keep them, like 5 minutes or less, the songs.
Oh, no. The Horse with No Name by America.
Done. So, all right, folks. The next thing you're going to hear is The Horse with No Name. You heard him. Go to, if you just Google Jim Vieira, you'll see a bunch of his videos right there. You'll see stuff with him and his brother. You already said it. It's easy as pie to do. He's also been on Earth Ancients a bunch of times, and now he's been here and will be on here hopefully a bunch of times. And if you're just finding this show by accident or because you're a Jim fan and then because of his promotion, you checked it out and you sort of like what you hear, this is sort of my wacky, not really wacky, but my exploration of everything between this and my 3 titles. So if you like and subscribe to Garden of Doom, that's great. You'll get Garden of Doom, which sort of like this, but all over a myriad of subjects. Garden Views is a little bit more legal, business, science, tech, entertainment, pop culture, but it's still me. It's still the same kind of variety, but a lot of space law in there as well from around the world and obviously beyond. And then there's a limited series, which hopefully will continue, which is GOD Presents Book of Black, which is me and pro wrestler PJ Black. That's why Book of Black. If you were a WWE head and you only know the big leagues, he was Justin Gabriel for 5 years in WWE. And we talked to people in and around wrestling about Garden of Doom stuff, not wrestling. And I've also assembled my own little group of Avengers so that, it doesn't have to be that much pressure on PJ. And so that is Super Panda, who is certainly super. Emmy-winning Super Panda, by the way. Mr. Thomas, currently with Major League Wrestling. And the legendary Lufisto. So we even have a female in our team. So there you go. All right. You've heard me enough. Thanks a lot. Tune into everything. Like, subscribe. And you'll hear from us later on in the week in the Garden of Doom.
Remember your name, 'cause there ain't desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain. Run free, 'cause the desert had turned to sea. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rings. The ocean is a desert with its life underground and a perfect disguise above. Under the cities lies a heart made of ground, but the humans will give no love. You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain.